Hey everyone, I'm Joe Brady and I'm here today to talk about getting great color for both portrait and landscape subjects. To make this happen, we're going to take a look at one of the most useful and economical tools that every photographer should have in their camera bag, the X-Rite ColorChecker Passport. It doesn't need batteries, it never becomes obsolete. It contains a set of color charts that provide a set of references that, combined with software, allow you to 1. Get an accurate white balance, 2. Create custom camera color profiles, 3. Make consistent white balance adjustments for when you prefer warmer skin tones or maybe more intense blues and greens in your landscapes. Now you may be asking, why is any of this necessary? Can't my camera auto white balance do all of this? The answer is a resounding no. Now I'm sure many of you understand why you need a neutral reference for white balance. Well, isn't having a custom white balance enough? Again, the answer is no. Here's why. Camera manufacturers also don't have a standard color set. They're all over the place. There is no standard for what red means. These are the color challenges that the ColorChecker Passport can help you overcome. Now, white balance is important, but it's the combination of white balance and the custom camera profile that get you to the best starting color place. Oh, by the way, one really critical point. To take advantage of a custom camera profile, you have to make sure you're shooting raw files. JPEGs already have all the color space and white balance information built into the file. Yes, you can still use the targets for white balance when shooting in JPEGs, but to put the power of a custom camera profile to use, you need to shoot in RAW. Now, the combination of using a camera profile and the white balance together can be confusing. So let's use a travel analogy to get us to perfect color. So imagine that I need to travel to, say, Redville from downtown Warwick. The profile knows that from the starting point, I need to go, say, 10 miles north and 3 miles east, and that puts me exactly in downtown Redville. Now, if I had the wrong starting point, which would be analogous to the wrong white balance, let's say I was in Cleveland, those directions would obviously take me somewhere else. So think of the white balance as your perfect starting point, and then the custom camera profile as the direction from that point to accurate colors. So here's how we're going to proceed today. I recently did 2 shoots, one for portraits and one for landscape photography. Now for the portrait shoot, we started in the studio with strobes, and then we went outside to shoot both ambient light and then using a speedlight flash both for a fill and as our main. In each case, the ColorChecker Passport was put to use to provide the most accurate color reference. For the landscape shoot, the timing worked out perfectly. I just happened to have a trip to the Bosque del Apache Wildlife Preserve in New Mexico on my schedule. So I took advantage of the location and I put the ColorChecker Passport to work on a wildlife and landscape shoot. Now after these shoots, we're going to go both into Lightroom and Photoshop and see how to put all this great color information to use. So we're going to start in the studio and then we'll head out west for our location shoot. Let's take a look. We're going to use the ColorChecker in a couple of different lighting situations. We're going to start in the studio today because, well, it's cold outside actually. We want to try to get as much done inside as possible. Now, I've got studio strobes set up. What that means is once I create a custom camera profile for my studio strobes, I'm really done. I won't ever have to do one again. Because remember, the ColorChecker corrects for changes in the spectrum. My studio light spectrum are always going to remain the same. So yes, I'm going to measure the intensity of the light. I may even adjust the white balance a little bit. I may check for it just in case if I change the power a lot, there's a change in white balance. So I will always take a reference shot. But once you create your profile for your studio lights, generally you won't have to do it again. So I'm going to meter Tristan first. And since this is the primary light, I'm just going to meter right back to the light. The light over here on this side is really acting as a fill. I've got it about a stop and a half under from what this one is. So I take my measurement, I'm getting f8 from my main, just so I can see what's going on. I'm going to put the dome in and measure my other lights. So I've got my fills coming in at f5, which is good. It's just going to add some light on this side of her head. And then lastly, I've got this background light to just add a splash of light there, and that's also at f5. So I've got my fill at f5, my background at f5, and the main light on her at f8. So that's a stop and a third lower than the main. This is the light I need to concern myself with. So I'm going to have Tristan hold the target, And I want it right underneath her chin. I want it right, because this is the part that we're interested in. So actually, I'm going to even hide your face. We get plenty of your face later, so we're going to hide it for now. And I want to actually point towards the light. And I know that this is f8. So I'll just take that shot. So let me grab that. Lovely. I'm also going to get one with both of the targets in, because I want to show you what we might use that for later. So I'm going to take another one where I get to see both targets. Great. All right, we're done with that. Now we can shoot. Great. Beautiful. All right, drop that whatever we call that thing. And if you can, bend at the waist towards me a little bit right there. That's it. Might feel weird, but it looks great. So we're outside, we've banished the dog. It's actually gotten kind of dark here. It's kind of chilly and all. And I'm going to shoot ambient first. Not something I would normally do. We're going to add a flash in and add some more interest. But if you need to do this, what I need to do is boost the ISO up. We also have very different lighting conditions. We're outside. We've got a canopy of leaves that right now are pretty yellow. So they're going to influence the color that ends up on her. So first thing, I need to get my meter reading. I'm back into ambient mode. I'm at ISO 800, 80th of a second at 5.6. In fact, I think I'm going to open up a little more. We're going to go for that blurry background. I'm going to go 125 at 4.5. And first thing we're going to do is take a couple of shots of the target. So if you would hold that. And again, I'm going to get both targets, and I'm going to get just the one. Great. Okay, we got the targets. Now I can get some shots. And again, in software, since we're shooting in RAW, in software is where we're going to adjust the colors. I'm going to do just a couple of shots here, because this is, again, not the way I would usually shoot. But then we're going to bring in a flash and make this a lot more interesting. You ready? Let's get some leaves there. Okay. Yeah, I really don't like the lack of light, but we'll get a couple of shots anyway. Get a couple of verticals. Okay. All right, so we've added a flash. I've got a speed light and an umbrella softbox right here. The flash is going to be 50 to 60% of the light because it's dark here. So by necessity, this is going to become the main light. But at 50 to 60%, now I have really two different color temperatures going on. I'm sure you've encountered that in weddings where you've got maybe tungsten in window light or flash in window light or fluorescent lights. We have the same thing going on here. So this is a time when you really need to create a custom white balance and a custom profile, because we're dealing with two different spectra of light. So again, if you get that right up in the right position, again, I'm going to use my meter because I don't want to guess. I want to have it perfect. Let me get myself out of the way. And I'm getting, let me do that one more time so I can get myself out of the way. I'm getting, I went down to a 400 ISO because I want to keep my depth of field shallow. I'm at f5, 125th of a second, and that makes the flash 60% of the light. So again, I could set my camera on flash for white balance, but 40% of it isn't flash. It's this kind of weird ambient light. All right, Tristan, you ready? Angle right back towards me this time. I'm just gonna make sure I get out of the way. Great. One more, rotate your body, right there, that's it. Nice. Beautiful. I'm gonna adjust the shutter speed. I wanna lighten up the back a little bit, and to do that, to let more ambient light in, I need to slow the shutter speed down. So I'm gonna go down to 60th of a second. And by the way, that has an effect of changing the percentage of flash to ambient. By doing that, from going 125th to 60th of a second, this is now 40%. So let me just take that one more time. And it is. So I'm at 60th of a second at 6.3, but now the flash is 40%. I've changed the ratio of ambient to flash. Just to be safe, I'm going to take another shot of the color checker with these settings because it may not be enough to make a difference, but changing from 60 to 40 may make this go more yellow because of all the leaves around. So let's go ahead and just be safe. It's easy to create these ColorChecker Passport profiles, so let's create them. Great. And let me take a couple of shots with this new mix. All right, so again, bend towards me a little bit. Nice. Beautiful. All right, now I'm going to come in a little closer. Nice. I'm at the Bosque del Apache National Wildlife Refuge. It's a little bit south of San Antonio, New Mexico. And I'm standing in front of this incredible site, this pond with thousands and thousands of snow geese who come through here. And this is a great time to use the color checker. I want to take a photograph of this under this light, and this is the profile I'm going to use all day. And you might ask, well, how about mornings and afternoons, that golden hour when the light gets golden? Exactly. I want it to stay golden. So I'm going to create my profile for the middle of the day for this scene behind me. Another thing that can cause your camera problems is when you have an overarching color that's reflecting up. There's a lot of dirt here, and then I've got the water here. And that has a tendency to fool your camera, particularly if you put it on auto white balance. So by having this, it's going to give me a reference that's going to eliminate any kind of reflected light that's altering the scene and give me a perfect reference for perfect color. So it's important that I make sure it's in the same light as the rest of my scene. So I want the sun completely illuminating this, and I don't want any shadows cast on it. So I simply hold it out in front of me, frame it. That's it. Now I have everything I need to go into software later and create that custom camera profile that's going to allow the colors in scenes like this to just snap in place. What could be easier? So I'm going to get some shots. I'm going to put this away. I've got my information that I need to create my custom profile. We'll put it all together in software afterwards. So that was obviously two very different activities, but both were a lot of fun. Now on the portrait shoot with Tristan, I knew that I could get great skin tones regardless of the lighting, and I could maintain the cool shade of purple in parts of her hair. Out in New Mexico, I knew that even though my camera white balance might have been confused by all those reflecting colors in the scenes, the ColorChecker Passport would make color editing a snap. Now before we go into software, one question I often hear is, how many custom camera profiles do I need to create? It's a personal preference on how serious you are about perfect color everywhere you go, but I like to create a custom profile for every lighting situation I come across. Well, what does that mean? Well, I'll create one for sunlight, one for shade, one for overcast skies, and then one for each type of added light I might use. Strobes, speedlights, tungsten, fluorescent, and occasionally when there's some kind of weird mix. The reason for that is that each of these types of light sources produces a different spectrum of light. Unlike sunlight, light bulbs and flashes are not continuous in their color output. They've got spikes and valleys. Tungsten lights, well, you can see that difference with your eyes. They have more yellow, you can see that when you turn them down on a dimmer, and less blue. Fluorescent lights often have a green spike of light in their output, and that's actually something your eyes cannot see. This can cause color shifts and even the loss of certain colors. Having a custom profile under these lighting conditions will fix that. Now it's time to go into the software and create a profile, then we can put it to use. We're going to start with Lightroom. Now when you install the ColorChecker Passport software, you get a plugin for Lightroom and a standalone app that lets you create profiles for the Adobe Camera Raw. One benefit is that regardless of which way you choose to create your profiles, once you create them, both Lightroom and Adobe Camera Raw will see them and can put them to use. So let's jump into software. Again, we'll start with Lightroom and then we'll go into Photoshop and use Adobe Camera Raw and the ColorChecker app to create our custom camera profile. So here we are in Lightroom 5. I've brought in all the photographs that we shot of Tristan during those three conditions, the studio shoot, the outside with the ambient light, and then the outside using the fill flash. And the first thing we need to do is we need to create the custom profiles based on those lighting conditions. This is a really simple process. Just take a look at this. First, bring up the image. Here's the one we shot for in the studio. And when you install the software that comes with the ColorChecker Passport, it will install a plugin into Lightroom, and it will also plug in a little desktop app that we'll use later on with Adobe Camera Raw. So if you go under Export with Preset, you'll see ColorChecker Passport listed here. and just give it a name that's appropriate. So I'll say, let's see, it was my Sony A7R, and it was Studio Lights. So I click on Save, and that's it. That's as complicated as it is to create a custom camera profile. Notice that I didn't have to do anything to the file first. I didn't have to do a custom white balance. I didn't have to do any cropping. This is a raw file. The software knows how to white balance based on what it sees on the target. It knows how to do everything. Just let it do its thing. So after maybe 45 seconds or so, generally, you'll see that the message comes up that the profile has been created, and Lightroom needs to be restarted to be able to see that. Now, like any good cooking show, I already had a profile created using this target, so we don't have to restart. Now, here's an important piece of information you need to understand, and that's the relationship between the white balance and this custom camera profile. If I come over here in Lightroom and grab the little color picker and go over to my brightest target right here and click on that, that gives me a perfectly neutral white balance. That's great. That's a perfect starting point, but it's not enough. What a custom camera profile does, it in essence gives the software directions on how to get to these standard colors based on that perfect white balance. So if I go under calibration, and rather than choose the Adobe standard, which is very safe but it's desaturated in certain colors, I want you to pay attention to what happens to these blues and the purple in Tristan's hair. Watch what happens when we choose our custom profile. So here's the A7R Studio Lights. I select that. And did you see all those colors jump? Let's zoom in a little bit and see that a little better. Again, pay attention to these blues and watch what happens to her hair. Here's what we were getting with this standard. And we've lost so much color. That's not what the target looks like. That's not how intense her hair looked like. This is what it looked like. So what the custom camera profile does is it uses that neutral, and then it gives directions from that neutral how to get to each of these perfect known colors. And that's what makes everything snap into place. That's also why you need them both, because if I chose some other white balance, let's say I had that as white balance, well, that's going to be pretty weird looking. Even though I have my custom profile, it's completely wrong because it's from the wrong starting point. So what that white balance does is it gives you the perfect starting point, and then what the camera calibration does is it allows all of those colors to go into the right spot based on that starting point. And it's really a dramatic difference. Let's take a look at just an image before and after. Here is just the standard image. This is right out of the camera. It's the Adobe standard profile. Now if we look under basic, it's just a flash preset. Now, it's a little bit yellow to my taste, and we've lost all of the purple in her hair. So here's the same image with the custom white balance and the profile applied, and you can see the difference. Again, let's zoom in on here a bit. So here's with the profile. Let's go back down to camera calibration. Here's with our custom camera profile. Here's without. So what's happened is, without the profile, her skin has gone a little bit too yellow, and we've lost the purple in the hair. Now we've got a much more neutral result. You can see the background looks more neutral, but her hair has got that intense purple back into it. Now while we're here, let's just take a look at the top target, because the top target is a kind of a flavoring target for that white balance. Let's say, for example, you are after a little bit of a warmer look. So instead of using our custom white balance, let's go back to a neutral. So this top row here is for portraits. This target right here is neutral, and you might be able to notice that it gets slightly more blue as it goes across. So if we were to white balance off of something that's bluer, you can see it adds a lot more warmth to the skin. You can see now our color temperature has gone up to 6,000 with a plus 25 tint, bringing it over more to magenta. Now this is different than the flash preset, which was 5500 but neutral. By having this 5500 without any kind of tint adjustment, the skin goes too yellow. So by using this custom warming, we can get to the same warmth every time. A lot of times people like to look a little warmer. That's why there's all those tanning salons around. So if this is the kind of look you want, after you've done your custom calibration and your profile, you can apply one of these warming patches if you want to warm up the skin a little bit. And there is a gradation of it. You can start just a little bit, or you can go a lot. A little bit strong for me. My personal favorite is in the middle. Really does a nice warmth to the skin without making it too much, and it pulls that yellow out of the skin that happens just from adjusting the color temperature. Now if you're happy with the colors you've got, you can then select all the images in your shoot, click on synchronize. I'm going to check none to start off. what we want to do is choose white balance, the process version, and calibration. Then when we synchronize, the custom white balance and the camera profile are applied to all the images. And that's as easy as it is. Remember, in Lightroom, none of this is permanent. We're working on raw files. These are just instructions for when the file is exported to go ahead and apply these settings, so you can always go back and change your mind. And that's one of the beauties of doing this kind of editing while you're in Lightroom. Now lastly, for our portraits, if you remember, we went outside and I shot both with just the ambient light and by using speed lights. I wanted to see how much of a difference there was in the profiles. So here we are with just ambient light. Again, not something I'd like to do because look at her eyes, they're just too deep in shadow. I really prefer to use fill flash in this situation. However, let's take this. We've got our white balance already, so this was selected, and our camera calibration is just daylight. So let's go ahead and take a look at one of the images. It's fine, but again, her eyes are way too deep in shadow. Yes, I could go in Lightroom and open them up, but I prefer to use a fill flash here. So let's scroll along. And if you remember, right at the very end, I did one where I dropped it down to a 40% fill. So here's the Adobe standard. Let's go ahead and zoom in. I want to zoom in a lot in this because I want you to take a look at these patches as they draw in. So here's the Adobe standard, and here's speedlights. So there's the equivalent of our 60% light. You can see it's a dramatic color change in a lot of the colors. Take a look at these blues and that red even. Again, here's the Adobe standard under those lighting conditions. Really lost a lot of saturation. Here's the speedlights. So I was curious to see if there was going to be a difference between 60 and 40% fill. And actually there was. It was subtle, but it is noticeable. In particular, for this one particular blue patch changed color. So here's our 60%. Watch what happens when we change it to the 40% fill flash custom profile. Did you see that? Actually, this red changes a little bit, and this blue gets a little deeper. Let me back off to our 60%. So you can see the difference there. So since the percentage of flash to ambient has changed, the color response has changed, and it actually was enough to warrant a difference. So that's how important this is. It will give you that perfect starting point. How far you want to take it is up to you, but you see it only just takes a couple of seconds to create a custom profile so that you can get the perfect color on your images. So here we see the effect of the speedlight, just a simple single flash in a softbox umbrella. Opens up the eyes, adds that beautiful catch light, and our custom white balance and custom profile bring all the colors right into the right place. And one last time, let's see what the Adobe standard gave us, and watch how much color it loses. Look at that. We lost all the color in the hair, and her skin has changed color. Just our 40% full flash custom profile, and everything snaps back into place, and that's our perfect image. Now let's take a quick look at creating and using custom camera calibrations in Adobe Camera Raw. And this is what we would use if you're just a Photoshop or Photoshop Elements users and don't use Lightroom. By the way, if you create a profile this way, both Photoshop and Lightroom see it. If you create a profile in Lightroom, then Adobe Camera Raw sees it as well. Now there's one extra step involved this time. Since it's not a plugin in Adobe Camera Raw, we do need to take our photograph of the target and save it. We need to save it as a DNG file, which happens to be the default, digital negative. And we're going to save it, let's just save it in on the desktop so it's easy to find. So let me tell it where. And I'm just going to call it target. And click on save. That's the only time you ever have to convert a file to a DNG if you're going to use the desktop app. So we've saved the target as a DNG file. Let's go ahead into the ColorChecker application, and it asks us to drag and drop a DNG image here, or we can just simply go to File, Add Image, and if you remember, I just put that on the desktop. And here's my target file. So I click on open, and the software is going to look at the target and it's going to find it. It's going to also find where the target is in the image. Okay, so the software has found the target. In fact, we can zoom out here so you can see it did see the entire image. What we have an option is to grab the corners here if we wanted to just adjust where the targets fall, but in general it will usually find it. Now you can see that the white balance looks off just from looking at it, but again, We don't have to do anything about it. The software knows that these patches here are neutral. It will do its own white balance behind the scenes. Now you also notice there's an option up here called the dual illuminate DNG. We're not going to go into that today, but we'll point you to a video that explains that in detail. However, for landscape photography, chances are you're not going to use that. Just this simple single color source is what you're going to do. So click on Create Profile, and just like we saw in Lightroom, give it a name. And this was Bosky Daylight. And I can type. And don't change the where. If you put it somewhere else, the software is not going to find it. Just leave it alone. Click on Save, and then the software will generate the profile. So here's the original file. No custom white balance, no custom camera profile. So let's go ahead and white balance, and we can see that neutralizes it. Now let's go to camera calibration. Now, the custom camera profiles are under this little icon of a camera over here. And again, it's the same kind of list that we saw where we were in Lightroom. And here's the Bosky Daylight that we just created. Assign that, and you can see those colors jump. In particular, these two blues, this red and this kind of plum color. Let's look at that one more time. There's the Adobe Standard. Again, we're losing so much color that way. This custom camera profile really snaps all the colors back into place. So again, like in Lightroom, we can simply click all of our images that we had open. Click on Synchronize. We want the white balance, the calibration, and the process version. Hit OK. And all of our images now have these settings. Now, just as a before and after, here's an image of a couple of snow geese. Let's take a look at these, how they existed before we assigned. And we can just go to Previous Conversion, and you'll get to see this was the color that we started with. Much different than what we ended up with. We can go ahead and reassign or resynchronize these two. Hit OK. And we can see we've got cleaner geese and bluer water. And that's what we're after. So one of the differences between Adobe Camera Raw and Lightroom is once we open these images, these changes then get built into the image. If we click on Done, it's just like we were in Lightroom. These settings will be applied to the image next time they're opened up, but they won't actually be applied. Once you hit Open, this converts it from the RAW with these settings. So that's how the workflow in Adobe Camera Raw works, and this would be the same if you're going to do Adobe Photoshop or Adobe Photoshop Elements. So let's sum up. Having the ColorChecker Passport available for all your shoots provides you with a perfect starting point for color under practically any lighting condition. Great landscape results by bringing out all the intensity of greens and blues, get perfect skin tones under any light, and have the capability to have images from different cameras show the same color response. This all becomes possible because the ColorChecker Passport provides that standard set of reference colors to ensure consistent and accurate color. Now, I've been using the ColorChecker Passport since it was introduced. I can't imagine shooting without it. On the few occasions I haven't had one with me, my edits became much more time-consuming and less accurate. Now, while I love working in Lightroom and Photoshop, I prefer that time be spent enhancing my images, not fixing color problems. Add the ColorChecker Passport to your camera bag, put it to use on all of your photo shoots. It's going to make it much easier to get perfect color wherever you go. I'm Joe Brady. Get out there and shoot, and don't forget to bring your ColorChecker Passport with you. Till next time, hope to see you online again soon. Bye-bye and be well.